Thank you very much, Colin, for that introduction, and welcome to the webinar that we want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this special call and what we hope to achieve from that. All right, so yeah, at the very beginning, welcome introduction, and then some of you will be very familiar with immersive technologies, but some of you maybe this is really your first time, you're interested in advertising or marketing, especially those of you that might be PhD students or very junior in your career, and we want to sort of lay out the rationale for why immersive technologies in advertising are important. So a little bit about what they are, the promise of immersive tech, and immersive tech trends. And then we're going to just talk about potential topics that might be of interest. Of course, if you have your own topics, we'd be very happy to talk about them as well. Either in this session, or you are very free to contact all three of us, and we'd be very happy to give some feedback, set up a private webinar or something like that. Great. So on to Anna.
Thanks very much, Kirk, and yeah, hello also from my side. It's really exciting that there is this opportunity now to develop more scholarship in the area of advertising in relation to immersive technologies. Immersive technologies have been really gaining the traction and popularity in the marketing area, but of late we've really seen the rise and new phenomena, both with the emergence of Metaverse and related phenomena in that area, but also with AR, VR, mixed realities coming up in new forms. There is for instance, a really exciting example here of that Van Gogh immersive experience. But you know, even though there's been all this exciting contribution already in marketing, there is a lot of missing pieces of this puzzle in terms of understanding how advertising really can make good use of new immersive technologies and related practices. And so we hope that with this special call, we can kind of provide some new inspiration, new knowledge, new ideas, obviously also managerial relevance, so new thought leadership in the advertising area. And that would help both the industry sector with pushing forward in terms of deploying these exciting technologies, and obviously creating that link between the scholarship and the industry. And if we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Kirk.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to point out that these cave events, or these very immersive experiences, that you don't have to have technology attached to your face. There's also head-mounted displays that you might be familiar with immersive gaming and stuff like that. And recently, Ray-Ban, that this is something you might want to try. At least in London, they're at the Ray-Ban store, they're promoting it. It's quite interesting. You can basically try it out in store, and it augments your reality. So there's all kinds of technologies out there, and advertisers need to know how to use these things, not just to create really engaging experiences. So go ahead, Anna.
That's great, Kirk. Maybe a few thoughts on, also what the promises are in this area. Why is it important to look at that? What's happening at the moment? And what we see really is this growth in the creative economies. So a few years ago, basically the sales of virtual goods and services, be that virtual products or virtual land, or different kind of services, were kind of basically non-existent. And then in the last few years, they've really grown in terms of that revenue. So the market value of that specific sector is really growing, and the expectation is that that's going to keep increasing. So that's one part of the picture. And we also see the big tech companies like Meta investing very heavily. So both in terms of the technologies, both in terms of the staff that's working in this area, the different kind of services that they're providing on their platforms, the vision that they have for how that platform is going to look like, not just the next year, but in 5-10 years. So there is that visionary element to it as well. And that's very interesting. And it's important that it's not just the tech developers that are part of that debate, but also obviously consumer sector, marketing sector, management areas, and so on. So again, we hope that the special issue can be part of that. And then also thinking obviously from the consumer side, what we see is that not only these virtual environments are being developed, but that also there is a significant uptake on the user side. So for instance, Roblox, which is one of the main virtual environments or metaverses, if you will, has, for instance, 50 million daily users, which is a significant number. And they're spending a significant amount of time on these platforms. And what's really interesting is that actually more than half of these users are under 16 years old. So there is that generational perspective coming in here as well. And that's something that's interesting for the brands and for the advertisers, knowing that these are actually new spaces for engaging, interacting with younger generations. And that obviously requires kind of new rules of the games and understanding how these users behave, what are their preferences and so on, and obviously how these interactions are being shaped up in these environments. Another interesting example, for instance, is the one by Gucci. So they launched a metaverse experience called Gucci Garden, and that ended up being very popular. And there were almost 20 million consumers visiting it and interacting with different Gucci virtual add-ons and wanting to spend time in that world. Now, obviously, then, you know, for instance, the question is, well, what is then the link between the experience that happens in that virtual space and the experience that might happen offline? To what extent consumers might then develop some kind of affinity for the Gucci brand? And to what extent is that just the gaming experience? So these are real questions that brands are facing right now and kind of are very hungry for more answers to such questions and similar dilemmas. So definitely a lot of scope for providing new insights, new knowledge.
Great.
And I'm happy to hand over to Kirsten now.
Thank you. So there's a lot of information on this slide. The basic takeaways is that immersive tech is continuously evolving. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I'm heavily drawn to researching immersive tech, is because what we know today about it is going to change tomorrow. We know that there's hints of what is changing, you know, why it's changing, how it's changing. So interesting research areas can focus on these changes. So one particular change that's emerging in some of the immersive tech is by integrating different senses into these technologies through haptic gloves, through smell-o-vision. Yes, smell-o-vision is now becoming a real thing. So how do these additional senses impact the consumer attitude, impact decision-making, impact the persuasiveness of advertising in these arenas? Likewise, it's also really interesting that VR is developing first and foremost outside of marketing and advertising. So you see a lot of the development and a lot of the research taking place in different contexts, like in hospitals and in health and well-being. So if we take that and apply it to advertising contexts, it would be interesting to see, you know, whether these effects and whether these interesting ideas can also manifest in persuasion by brands and retailers. So certain companies are developing apps in different immersive tech, either through AR and VR, aiming at improving the consumer health and well-being, such as Retreat developing an app focused on self-improvement, personal development. Also for hospitals, doctors are looking at how they can treat patients. So there's some research that looks at following up on procedures and how patients follow through with their prescription plans, and even how immersive tech can help reduce the need for anesthesia during procedures. So there's some really interesting effects, and if we bring it over to marketing and advertising, we can kind of look at it from pains and gains and see how immersive tech can be used in these domains. And then, of course, an interesting area is just how digital marketing and how social media can coincide with AR, VR, with this immersive tech within the metaverse and so forth, because we don't really know much about how this type of tech interacts with these other cues in the environment, with other advertising efforts. So is it an add-on, an additive effect, or not? And then another interesting application is related to avatars, because individuals can create their own avatars. And there's some interesting research lately that shows the Proteus effect, that when an individual has an avatar, they tend to react in that avatar's form, whether they're very strong, so they tend to act aggressive, or whether the avatar is more beautiful, then they tend to act in that certain way. So then how does the avatar then affect their interactions with others, affect their interaction with advertisements in these environments, or even if a brand or an advertiser is represented through an avatar. So just picking up from some of the excellent research in other areas can be an interesting way to approach the special issue. And I think Kirk has a video from Mark Zuckerberg talking a little bit more about the metaverse and how we can expect some of these new trends to develop.
Yeah, I know that it's everyone's the favorite guy to hate, but the thing is, he and his company are thought leaders in this space. Whether you buy into his specific view, I think it is interesting to see what industry is talking about right now and kind of what's possible. So I'll play about a minute, and then I'll skip ahead to a really interesting example that video has. So I'll let him speak.
Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us for Inside the Lab. We work on a lot of different technologies here at Meta. Everything from virtual reality to designing our own data centers. And we are particularly focused on foundational technologies that can make entirely new things possible. And today, we're going to focus on perhaps the most important foundational technology of our time, artificial intelligence. A lot of AI research is focused on understanding the physical world. But in the metaverse, we're going to need AI that is built around helping people navigate virtual worlds as well as our physical world with augmented reality. And because these worlds will be dynamic and always changing, AI is going to need to be able to understand context and learn in the way that humans do. And when we have glasses on our faces, that will be the first time that an AI system will be able to really see the world from our perspective. See what we see, hear what we hear, and more. So the ability and expectation that we have for AI systems is going to be much higher. Now, we are already using simpler machine learning systems to parse information for us today. Every time you get a recommendation or search for something, or even take a photo on a phone, there is machine learning in the background. Computing is also becoming increasingly contextual. Instead of this static experience that's the same no matter where you are, the way that we use computers now adapts much more to what you're doing. And as devices have gotten better at understanding and anticipating what we want.
Okay, so this is that a little bit more into that that example that he just talked about.
More immersive and multimodal interactions with AI assistants.
How's my pozole come?
For example, your assistant could help you make your mom's delicious pozole, listing out ingredients as you need them and proactively guiding you through the recipe.
Careful, Jose. You already added salt to this recipe, and I noticed you are running low, so I've put in an order for more.
By combining augmented and virtual reality devices with our Project Karaoke model, we hope the future of conversational AI will be more personal and seamless.
Here you go. Thank you. Mom always liked this recipe spicy. What was the pepper she recommended?
Your mum used habaneros pepper. And don't forget to slice it really thinly like she does. Great job, Jose. Is it smelling like one your mum makes?
It smells like the real thing.
There are 4 basic pillars of our work on AI.
And that's enough of him. So, and while this is kind of the future, it's actually not. This is not science fiction. This is something that there's prototypes developed that perhaps Alexa and other sort of smart virtual agents aren't there yet, but this is coming very, very quickly. And whether it's exactly like that, it might be, well, time will tell. Okay, so this is sort of an edited version of the full call for papers, the different ideas. So we, Kirsten, Anna, and I got together and just thought, what are some of the challenges and the opportunities of immersive tech? And so why we started with this cognitive processes, because if we, there's a police officer just passing my office, so I'm sorry. But already in the consumer behavior literature and in the marketing literature, there actually is quite a bit of knowledge about that cognitive processes that are triggered with different forms of AI, of immersive tech. But what we don't know is what is it? So what is the how does that change when you have different sort of omni-channel or integrated experiences that that present messages, advertising messages in unique ways, as well as perhaps there are new or different kinds of persuading tactics that can be developed that can aid advertisers to overcome the the noise of the metaverse. I think we're really interested also in how to mix some of the findings that we already know, all of the insights from social media research and digital media research with these new platforms that aren't just text-based or video-based, but actually real-time immersive environments that consumers can interact with other consumers, with brand agents, and with virtual agents that that are designed by AI. Should I pass it on to maybe Kirsten?
Sure, thank you. So we were also talking about the different forms of presence, because presence might be experienced differently in different forms of VR versus AR. And so how does presence, spatial presence geographically, the social presence that you feel with others, and even feeling self-present in your own identity, how did those affect persuasion attempts within AR, VR, Metaverse? I know there's quite a bit of conflicts in the literature, so that would be an interesting area to tap into. And then, as I mentioned before, with smell-o-vision, there's a lot of interesting things happening with sensory simulation outside of just auditory and visual sensory information. So how do you pair in additional stimuli, even gustatory? I have not seen anything on gustatory with immersive tech, so that could be quite promising as well. And we know that there are certain things that mirror real life, where immersive tech leads to the same things in real life, but there are other situations where it can be a little bit more nuanced. And I think sensory and even cognitive processes can be some of those areas. And then assessing how the ability to personalize avatars. As I mentioned, the whole idea of being able to have an avatar in the first place, using the avatar to act as a source of inspiration on how to engage, how to interact with social media and even with others, or an advertisement, will be a really interesting, promising piece of research. There's not a lot done on avatars, and just as well, there's been quite a bit of research investigating how VR and AR compared to control instances lead to quite positive downstream consumer responses, and people tend to be more persuaded by immersive tech. But what about those negative consequences as well? It would be interesting to see something that's a bit more counterintuitive. And then advertising within immersive games. Once again, not a lot of research on immersive gaming, but even advertising within these games, even if it's a non-profit message or if it's a for-profit message, what impact do those advertisements have, even when consumers know that that they're being advertised toward? How do they engage with that message? What are the new rules of engagement in immersive environments? How should an individual and an advertiser connect, be approached? Is it more of a one-to-one interaction in these type of environments, or is it still seen as media versus consumers? And then how should privacy concerns be dealt with? Do consumers perceive that there are any concerns with their privacy? Some research says that yes, they know that there's some privacy concerns, but it doesn't really affect their behavior for the most part. But when you're integrating some of these other these more immersive technologies, and even on the metaverse, it gives rise to other issues that we deal with already in social media, such as harassment and bullying, but it could be even more amplified just given the connection that you're able to achieve in these types of immersive texts. So now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Anna for the last set of topics.
Thanks very much, Kirsten and Kirk. Yeah, so a few more things to mention that might be of relevance to the authors that are interested in the special issue. So for instance, another interesting aspect is obviously what kind of new data is now going to be captured in some of these new environments that we talked about. So virtual environments or metaverses, and obviously the data that's been captured with some of the more established, if you will, immersive tech. So, you know, VR, augmented reality, some forms of mixed reality. And what does that mean both for brands, advertisers, and for consumers, you know, taking into account the, you know, some of the societal well-being, privacy concerns that Kirsten just talked about. And then I think one of the key issues really here to consider is how can advertisers be good and ready for these new types of immersive tech that you know are both coming, and you know some of them are already there. And what's really interesting there to consider is both to what extent are they similar to more established platforms like Kirk mentioned before? So, you know, what is the overlapping with social media, but also what is new here, right? So in what way should advertisers approach this differently? And some of the things to mention here, for instance, is that community, for instance, is a very strong, much stronger element when it comes to the metaverse, virtual environments, as opposed to maybe some other digital technologies. And that's one of the key challenges, for instance, for the advertiser to understand, well, how can they integrate in the communities in the way that they can co-create value, co-create brand narratives, experiences, and so on. And some of the brands have already kind of started to understand how to do that. But obviously there's a lot of scope for new creative approaches when it comes to that. And the other big thing, obviously, in that area is the gamification. So if there was one element of, you know, the metaverse and virtual environments that kind of sets them apart, is how big gaming is in virtual environments, and to what extent is gamification going to be part of advertising in this space. And that's something that's really interesting and important to consider. And, you know, speaking about the community, well, how is that going to reshape the relationships between brands and consumers. Before we mentioned, for instance, the Gucci garden. And obviously, that's a very different type of immersive space where new types of interactions are emerging, and how is that shaping those relationships, and what kind of opportunities is that bringing, but also, to what extent does that require for advertisers to really change their approach and maybe in some ways, break away from some of the more traditional approaches. And that's really important knowledge. And finally, obviously, consumer experience remains one of the big themes, not just in advertising, but in marketing. And it really is important to understand what's the potential of immersive tech and new immersive environments that are developing for delivering these experiences, and to what extent these experiences kind of, play by the rules of the established experiential marketing, but to what extent are there new types of experiences, and what does that mean for advertisers? What's the relevance there? What are the new opportunities? So as you can tell, really a lot of exciting topics, a lot of different directions to take. And yeah, we hope that can obviously cater to a lot of different interests that you might have. But as Kirk mentioned earlier on, we are not bounded by some of these ideas that we've now talked about. Obviously, we're open to other relevant topics and ideas that you might have within that space. So this is not restrictive, but hopefully inspirational for your research.
Great, Anna. And then this is the last slide. We're basically done. I just wanted to give our emails again. It's on the call for papers, but we're very open to having conversation with authors and people that are still designing their studies or thinking, would that fit? Of course, it does have to be on marketing, communications, advertising, or some kind of branding. So then not every study that has immersive tech in marketing would fit. But so I think, rather than submit and get a desk rejection, just maybe we're very open to looking at your abstract or having a quick call or something. So our deadline is July 3rd next year. But we're also accepting continual submissions. So, you don't have to wait until July. Submit early, and we'll take care of your paper. So I don't know, 6,000 to 7,000 words, because of the work of Colin. Now it was always almost a struggle to get down to that 7,000 words, but now references are not included in that word count, and the web appendices are also an option for those that want to include maybe experimental stimuli or more data or details about the data. That's perfect for you. And then 2 other questions. How can you make your paper relevant in the future? So it's not just about now, but how is it going to keep on driving thought in 5 years' time? And really important with JAR is, how will it change the way that advertisers, branders, or marketers think about your topic? So that's about it. Gonna stop sharing, and I think we're open for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your rich overview of the call for papers. It's awesome. I'm super excited for this one. I know there's been a ton of interest within industry on this topic. So I'm super excited to have this special issue going forward. Looks like you already have a question. Fantastic. Yeah. You want me to dive in and take that one to start? Yeah, sure. So I mean, obviously there's a lot of really good journals that are out there. This one is one that's really widely read by industry. So JAR is actually run by the Advertising Research Foundation, which is a consortium of different advertisers, marketers, and it's based in New York, and it gets read a ton by industry. It's also going to get promoted a lot across all of our different social outlets and things like that. And of course, we're a really well-ranked journal as well. So if you're considering, I definitely encourage you to submit. We'd love to have your work submitted, but it's really up to you.
I could
Any
also
other
add that
questions? Go for it.
I can also add that if your research is ranked according to CABS, AGJ, then it is a highly ranked journal. It's a 3-star.
And maybe just one additional point is that, you know, all three of us, so Kirk, Kirsten, and myself, are very engaged in the space of immersive technologies. And, you know, we've all already published on this topic and are very keen to develop really thought leadership in this area. So we hope to, you know, also provide very constructive editorial guidance in that sense to really provide new knowledge, you know, both for the readership and you know, for the wider audience and the industry. So just to mention that too.
And this really just speaks to the depth in which you went through your call. So a few questions coming through here. Cool. I'll give it another 10, 15 seconds. But if there's any other questions, you're welcome to, of course, reach out to the co-editors as well and ask, as they mentioned. And again, just want to stress that they really highlighted, as I mentioned, that we're looking for papers that are relevant to advertisers and marketers. So really think about like AR, VR, Metaverse, but is this going to be something that an advertiser or marketer would find helpful or interesting or useful and change the way they potentially think? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kirsten, Anna, and Kirk, for going through and providing such a rich overview of the call for papers that you have out. I'm super excited. We've got a long lead time as well, going until July. So lots of time to go through and run studies, design experiments, things like that. Also, we have one question as well, too.
Yeah, we have one more question. Would you be opposed to the sports industry? I think that we're open to every industry. Whether B2C, B2B, could be sports, but it does need to be some sort of marketing communications, or it has to be important for advertisers or brands and how they communicate with their customers. So yes, we're open to sports.
Maybe just to chip in on that one is that, esports, for instance, is one of the sectors that, has seen quite a substantial growth in this space in terms of immersive games and is strong across some of these platforms that we've spoken about today. So yeah, if it's captured with, that advertising marketing perspective that Kirk just talked about, then, surely there is a lot of interesting things to dig in there.
I think the next question, what about methods? I think we're open to different methods, qual, quant, as long as it's related to the topic in advertising marketing.
Yeah, text analysis. I mean, it really doesn't matter. I don't think, as long as it's informative and it's within that word count. So, but yeah, and it's indicative of some wider learnings for the industry.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate it. We'll get this up on our YouTube channel so people can watch it and also post it on the page. But thank you again for doing this, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Look forward to seeing your papers. Bye.